I'm Karu, founder and CEO of Dreamtonics. So this time we're going to release 3 new choir voices at once. So we're just not talking about 3 voices, but inside each voice there are actually 16 voices, making it a total of 48, which is our biggest voice release so far if you count it this way. The idea of making a choir voice for Synthesizer V has been around since 2022. Obviously, there are already a lot of sample libraries for choirs. With these sample libraries, you usually get pre-recorded vowels, syllables, multiple vowels, all these combinations. The quality is quite good because these are the real thing after all. But on the downside, obviously, you don't have too much control over the lyrics or over the melody. So we've been observing like a lot of users back then, it was 2022 or even earlier, had already been experimenting with making choirs in Synthesizer V. How they will do it back then or even now is to just layer multiple solo voices on different tracks. So you will do a lot of tweaking to try to differentiate them a little bit to achieve a richer texture. But in general, we're just curious how close you can get to a real choir with this type of emulation. If you really think about it, the underlying issue behind layering multiple solo voices for Synthesizer V is that all these solo voices, or at least most of them, was based on samples recorded in separate physical locations. So these are different rooms, different materials, different mics, different setups. So it could be quite challenging to get them singing coherently as if they were recorded in the same room.
Hi, I'm Junko. I'm operations manager within Dreamtonics. For this choir project, I was in charge of logistics, which means I sourced and then also coordinated choir singers. One day, Carl said that our next project is a choir. And then I've seen choir on TV, of course, and then that is Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, it's very famous. And then the lead singers are like 4 people, right? SATB, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. So I thought that he meant, the recording of 4 people, 1 person from each part. But, later on, it turned out it's not 4 people. It's 4 people per part. So 4 by 4, then it is 16 people in total. And then that sounded, felt insane to me because, it's going to be very difficult to, coordinate their schedule. Then, very luckily, we are based in Tokyo, by the way. Very luckily, we had a local connection with a local professional choir group. So we needed to start, from scratch, experimenting because we didn't know how to record the choir voice. We need to be very careful about spacing and then also the position over each microphone and also each singer.
Hi, I'm Yongxin. I'm the sound engineer and data processing manager of Dreamtonics. So at the very beginning, we actually had a lot of questions. We are thinking if there is a way to make individually recorded solo voices just very close to a choir recording. For example, what if we put a mic in front of each singer in the choir and try to record them as solo voices? So to answer that, we decided to verify it through real recording experiment and comparisons just in our office here. So in our early testing setup, we tested many microphones with different directivity patterns. We tried condenser mics, the dynamic mics, and even some shotgun microphones. I was trying to see if you can get rid of the mic bleeding. So if that sounds possible, we can record the choir just like solo voices and still preserve the overall choral blend. However, that turns out to be quite hard. We find the result to be very sensitive, especially when we're trying to reproduce that exactly the same experiment in the real studio. So there are always 1 or 2 singers who are slightly either too far from the mic or just singing a little bit too loud. To make a comparison, we also did another experiment. We invite the same group of singer and let them to record the same song in our solo recording booth, just here. It's like, so in this experiment, it's like taking apart a choir and putting it back, and to see if it still sounds like a real choir.
Naturally, if you think about like how a choir sounds like, if the choir sounds so good, you will imagine like all the singer will also have to be getting really flawless performance inside a choir, but that's actually quite the opposite. When we listen to the recording, what's really interesting is they almost sound kind of drunk. The timing, the pitch are all off, but when you put them back together, it's almost like magic. The brain just instantly identifies that as a choir, and it's a very good choir. Now, I guess that is more or less the conventional thinking in 2025, where everyone's training big AI models. But if you just bake the model on a fixed setting of a choir, you can't do more. You can't add more singers. You can't really go inside a choir and tweak each of them. So I guess if we're building these choir voices as a natural extension of our solo voice series, we want to retain the same level of attention to detail. Like all these different parameters you can tweak in the choir. You can take it apart and tweak everything and put it back together. That's the final thing we want to achieve. So the final model design is not a big model, but it's a small and smart model. It understands what's going on inside a choir. It is trained on a real choir, but trained on multi-microphone recordings. So the model understands this spatial setting where you have singers sitting in different places, and each of them are sitting slightly different with a little bit of timing difference, a little bit of pitch difference, and it's able to model these differences in a very coherent way.
So we finally establish our standard procedure for choir recording. And then the next challenge is that we needed to apply this procedure to other choirs, which is English and then also Chinese.
Once we had a clear theoretic direction, but maintaining the quality consistency across sessions was actually not easy at all. We needed to strictly control the microphones, the singer's position in the room, and the distance between each singer and their mic, just as I said before. So during our first large-scale project, the Japanese choir recording, my colleague and I can supervise the recording sessions just on site and managing and monitoring, managing and adjusting everything. After that, I wrote down and standardized the entire workflow for the other two projects, which is the English and the Chinese. However, when it comes to the remote recordings, it just gets even harder. I have to find a way to supervise the session remotely. And for example, and reviewing the live rendition from the local engineer and give my feedbacks on them. And also, the singers are totally not used to such a tightly controlled recording setup. After the recording is finished, there's still a lot of things to do. There is post-processing, such like noise reduction and the breathing controls. You see, as you know, that we are actually recording the 4 people at the same time, but they don't usually breathe at the same time. We have to deal with that. So it has taken us for about over a year to record all parts for the Chinese and English choir. Then we trained quite a few versions, and we found a lot of problems in for example, the annotations and where there's noises or the singer was singing too loud or everything. We then went back to fix the recordings. In the end, it took a lot of iterations to achieve a consistent texture that sounds just like the original choir. But in the end, in the terms of the final results, I'm actually very happy with how the 3 choir voices sound.
Hi, I'm Miguel. I'm Dreamtonics product specialist. Of course, we are releasing different choir voices, and each one of them have their own texture and have their own unique elements or unique characteristics for them and in them. I will recommend to the users to just check the demos and to check how this choir sounds and how this choir sounds, and then to make the best pick. I wouldn't say like, oh, if you take this choir, probably this choir is going to sound better for this. Because it really depends on how experimental you want to get and how certain results can really leave you surprised on how on the choir and the things that you can do with it. When I was creating the demo song for the choir video, the first thing that I started to notice was how the tools that I had and the flexibility that I had with the software in itself was defining how I was start to compose the different sections that were part of the song itself. So, you know, the most possibilities you have, the more tools you can get, and the more generous, or the more your ideas don't have to be stopped by technical limitation. Because it's something that sometimes you can ignore very easily. Once you only get a certain tool and that's the only tool that you are using, probably you are ignoring a lot of other possibilities that there are regarding the composition or what you can do with the tool itself. For this update, we not only think about the choir, but also new things that come with including the possibility of a choir inside of Synthesizer V. First, starting with the room simulator. Once you have control over the space and once you have control over how and where these voices are going to come from, then you start to expand how you are thinking about your composition, because now you're not only thinking, you know, in this like mono stereo space and just thinking and composing regarding that, but also you start to think like, okay, what happens if I put an element or if I put a singer farther away from the mic and farther away from the listener in itself. We are not expecting professionals to use the room simulator as the main element where they are going to mix all of the compositions or the vocal arrangement in itself, but to have these ideas and to have something that right away gives you how it's going to sound, or like a preview of how it's going to sound in a certain position, I think is very useful.
What makes Dreamtonics special? We really enjoy the physical process of modeling sound. By physical, I mean to gain a really deep understanding of how the sound is produced, and then try to make use as much as possible to build our models, which involves deep learning and signal processing as well.
You know, something that I definitely noticed while creating the demo song and getting all these pieces of music together and arranging it and all of that was how important it is to capture this very human element or very human feeling of a lot of people gathering together to sing. I think there's something very special in getting a bunch of musicians or a bunch of people in general singing together, whether it is a concert, whether they are professionals making a recording. It's just about how powerful a piece of music can get when you just add that element of a lot of people getting together for a goal, which is just to sing a melody. I think that's very powerful.